Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of This Week in British History. This one is going to be a bit special because we're going to focus on one particular event which happened in 1215, and that is the sealing of Magna Carta that happened on the 15th of June 1215. And the reason I want to focus on this document is that it has endured and still affects our lives today in 2020. So we're going to go right back and have a look at what happened on the 15th of June 1215, what the document actually said, what it was like, what it meant, we're going to look at the name Magna Carta as well, and what that actually meant then, and we're going to go on to talk about how that name has evolved in terms of its meaning and its significance and what it represents in our minds. Now, 2 years ago, I was actually at Runnymede, where the Magna Carta was sealed on the 15th of June. So 2018, I was there on the 15th of June. So I'm going to intersplice today's episode with some of the footage that I took while I was there as well. So it's going to be enjoyable. It's going to be intriguing, I hope. And you will probably want to go and find out, I hope you will want to go and find out even more after this video. So I have put lots of further reading, suggestions, sources, videos, books, all sorts, websites below in the show notes for you to go and further your understanding. So 2015 saw the 800th anniversary of the sealing of Magna Carta, and that is when my interest in it was pricked. And the reason that I continued to develop my interest in Magna Carta, and I still have a long way to go to learn even more, I am absolutely sure, is that my understanding of Magna Carta was actually so far removed from the actual events right back in 1215, but also from how Magna Carta has been used throughout time and how it still affects us now. And so I thought you would be interested as well. And hence this episode is going to be dedicated to Magna Carta. So we're going to begin by going to Runnymede and finding out a little bit more about the Charter and about the place where it came into being.
I've come to Runnymede on the 15th of June, the anniversary of the sealing of the first issue of Magna Carta in 1215 by King John. And the Magna Carta has stood the test of time because of the essence of it, not necessarily the actual content of the charter that was drawn up in 1215. Now, that charter was actually known as the Charter of Runnymede, where it was sealed. It didn't become known as Magna Carta until the introduction of the Forest Charter later on, and so you had two charters. And Magna Carta meaning Great Charter, not as in it was great, the great ideas, which kind of has taken on that idea since. It was great as in the larger of the two charters. But for now, it was known as the Charter of Runnymede. And John put his seal on it on the 15th of June. It had begun on the 10th of June with the document itself. It had begun, if you like, on the 10th of June with the original Articles of the Barons, which was effectively a list of demands from the barons about what they wanted the king to abide by. That then set off a series of shuttle diplomacy where different versions of the document would be revised, sent to the opposite camps, revised again, and there would have been daily meetings here from the 10th of June. There are no contemporary accounts, unfortunately, so we are left to fill in some of the blanks. But there would have been daily negotiations until the 15th of June, when John decided to stick his seal on the document as it stood at that point. And it seems that John did that without the barons sort of realising that it was going to happen there and then, because there's a clause in there that stipulates that 25 barons, one being the Lord Mayor of London, could hold John to account for the clauses in the Charter. However, they were not named. So that's kind of an indication that that was not their final revision for the Magna Carta, for the Charter that became to be known as Magna Carta. But John, in a sort of take it or leave it now, stuck his seal on it. Now, he retracted it very, very quickly, well, immediately afterwards. So I think it didn't really matter to John whether the final document was fully negotiated, because he had absolutely no intention of sticking to it anyway.
Because immediately he petitioned the Pope to annul it, to just get rid of it. He wanted it wiped off the face of the earth. Now, of course, by this point, you've already got copies in circulation, so it's not as easy as just saying, oh no, never existed, because what would have happened is that the original document would have been then copied by scribes, who then it went out to all the shires over the country. We're not exactly sure how many of them were produced. I've seen numbers ranging from 50 to hundreds. So, but we do know that 4 survive. 4 legible copies survive from 1215. You have 2 in the British Library, 1 at Salisbury Cathedral, which is well worth a visit, and 1 at Lincoln Cathedral. There is also 1 from Canterbury, however that was damaged in a fire in the 1700s, and all the ink is no longer legible. It has been read through, I can't remember what they call it, the clever spectral camera, that's been able to be read. It is actually, it's really sad, because that's the only one with John's original seal still attached to it as well. But anyway, so that was 1215, but like I say, it was immediately revoked by John, annulled by the Pope, Innocent III, if annulled's the right word, but effectively it was John tried to wipe it off the face of the earth. It's really only because of John's death from dysentery the following year, and his son coming to the throne, Henry III, as a minor, only at the age of 9, that actually ironically led to the reinstatement of Magna Carta. Now, what happened is, for Henry's regency, he had a regent called William Marshal, who was a powerful baron but also politically savvy. Really, what he recognised was that he could use this document that was already really, really important to the barons, so the powerful men of the country. This document meant so much. They'd gone to war with their king about it, you know, so it really meant a lot. And so what William Marshal decided to do was reinstate this with a few changes as a royal document. So whereas before it began with the Articles of the Barons on the 10th of June, where they effectively handed over a list of demands to the king, and then the Magna Carta that was sealed on the 15th of June was a variation on that after negotiations. But it started with a list of demands from the barons. What William Marshal decided to do was take that document and give it and issue it as a royal document. So this is what the monarchy, this is what the crown, these are the rules the crown are willing to abide by, and this is what people can expect, this is their rights. And there was some very, very specific things, very local to the time and local to places in there, that, you know, things about fishing weirs on the River Thames, and things like that. So there was a mixture. There were obviously, when you read through them, there were things that were obviously very specific but really bugging, really, really important to particular people at that time. And so it was reissued, like I say, in 1217. It was reissued again in 1225, and it's the 1225 version that then went on to the statute book in 1297, when Edward I put his sort of agreement to it. This was a medieval English document that has travelled and has had significance beyond its own physical self, and because of the ideals, the emotions in it. And when I say emotions, my view of this is that
the reason Magna Carta has endured is because it is a raw human emotion regarding fairness. Regarding fairness. We know it doesn't feel fair if when we inherit we have to pay most of it over to the government. Part of the clauses in Magna Carta dealt with inheritance tax. We don't want to feel that anyone is being arrested and held against their will for no reason. Being held without trial, without reason, was a clause in the Magna Carta. All these things, they're basically a raw human emotion or a consideration. We know what feels fair and what doesn't. And what Magna Carta did was write it down for the first time. So Runnymede, as you can see, is a field. I'm on the banks of the River Thames. If I turn it around, can you see the rivers behind me? I don't know if you can see, that's the river anyway. So it's already an ancient meeting place. Its name meant sort of a place for speech, a place for talking. It was good for other reasons as well. It was halfway between the King's camp at Windsor and the Baron's camp in Staines. We're about an hour away from London here. So these negotiations weren't taking place in London. London was actually already captured by the barons at this point. John had lost London. So he was in his favourite castle in Windsor, which is about a 7-minute drive from here. So Runnymede, again, it was also a kind of we're next to the river. It was kind of boggy. So not a great place for either side to decide to launch an attack on the other, so there's kind of safety in that as well. As you can see, there's a road that goes through it nowadays, which I happen to think is a great shame.
So here I have for you a facsimile of one of the 1215 Magna Cartas, so one of the original Magna Cartas, and this is one that's been facsimile of one that's in the British Library. The British Library have two, Salisbury Cathedral have one and Lincoln Cathedral have one. First of all, let's talk about why they're different. So this is the one that's in the British Library. It looks different in shape and style slightly to the others, and that's because they were each unique. They're on parchment, which is treated animal skin, and the document shape size would be dependent on the shape of the animal skin. So there's one difference. Also, the markings that you see on the parchment are the markings of the animal skin. So there's another uniqueness as well to the document. Each one was handwritten by a scribe. So again, you have a uniqueness there in the handwriting, and probably, I imagine, differences with odd mistakes, such like as you get with copied documents. The document is written in Latin, and you'll see that although we think of Magna Carta as having numbered clauses because that's how it's translated for ease, you'll see that actually on the document itself it is continuous writing. It's not set out in paragraphs or spaced out in any way. And that was purely down to saving space. Like I say, the parchment is an animal skin and it's expensive. It takes time to produce. So, and there were a lot of these to copy and send out to the shires. So, to save space, the writing is all continuous. It's written in Latin. The document is 4,500 words long, and it's broken down into 63 clauses by modern numbering. Like I say, it's all continuously written, but there's 63 different clauses. This is the 1215 version. So this is the original version and the version that never got very far. It was revoked by Pope Innocent III within weeks of it being issued. He and John had made up, after Pope Innocent III had actually excommunicated John, they'd made up England was under the overlordship of the Pope, and the Pope wanted John to fight on the Crusades with him. So there was reasoning behind Pope Innocent III's support of John when he wanted to pull this document. Throughout medieval England, the Magna Carta was sort of revived and reissued at certain times, generally when they needed to, well, always when there needed to be a reassertion of the power balance between the king and the people, whoever the people were included in that definition at that time, depending on when it was. And it was a reassertion of the king's promises to rule, almost rule by consent. Yes, you can rule, but there's things that you need to do if you're going to be, if we're all going to be happy while you're doing that. And I think the fact that it comes up again and again is an indication that the kings weren't actually that good at keeping to their promises. Then after the medieval period, it goes a little bit quiet on the Magna Carta front until the 17th century. There is a reference to Magna Carta in a law about weights and measures under the rule of time of Henry VII, the first Tudor king. Interestingly, in Shakespeare's play King John, it doesn't mention Magna Carta. Perhaps the Tudor and early Stuart period, I'm not sure when King John was written, was not the time to remind people that in the past people had been able to hold their monarch to account. But we don't go that far into the reign of the Stuarts before Magna Carta becomes very important. And I think it's from this period that we probably get our interpretation of what Magna Carta means from. I think this was the seeds of it. And these are, of course, the English civil wars, with Charles I on the throne being accused of tyranny and ruling without due process. He wasn't calling Parliament, he wasn't consulting with the representatives of the people. So it became really important, and the opposition to Charles I were looking for something that to use to demonstrate Charles's behaviour, that Charles's behaviour was wrong. Magna Carta provided the perfect vehicle for this. Not only could it be said that Charles was betraying the terms of the Magna Carta, the terms between that had been set between the monarch, the crown, and his people, but this was an ancient document, so it was sort of a double whammy. He was cutting through that relationship in the time, but also through an established ancient agreement. Magna Carta owes quite a lot, I would say, to a lawyer at this time called Sir Edward Coke, spelt Coke, but I'm sure it's pronounced Cook, for its sort of totemic status that it develops. In my reading, seems to be the first one to refer to Magna Carta in terms of its size, which I think is where we get this idea that it's the Great Charter, as in the brilliant charter, or Americans I don't think use the word brilliant, so the fantastic charter, for the content. I don't think before that it was referred to as that, because it was more of a description of it, but he refers to it as so I'm going to read this, not for its largeness but for its weight, and he said that in the House of Commons. So in terms of, so when he talks about the weight of it, he's no longer describing the document as a great charter or a larger charter to the smaller charters that were the Forest Charter, and but that it held weight, it had gravitas. It was also during this period that we get the belief that there was some sort of linear sequential process by which England went from tyranny through to liberty and freedom. And then in the 17th century, the word of Magna Carta, or the ideals, the legend of Magna Carta, as Dan Jones describes it, actually physically travels with the founding fathers over the Atlantic to their settlements. Now, it's more the ideals that Magna Carta was communicating than the actual content of the document itself. But still, these were fledgling communities that needed or wanted some sort of written down constitution. And in the 18th century, we have American independence and the Bill of Rights written into the American Constitution, heavily based on the ideals that are in Magna Carta. And some of the language is sort of similar and recognisable. So you have the no taxation without representation, or without consent, and no imprisonment without due process. Important rules, I suppose, set down as to how people living in the country can expect their lives to be governed. And so Magna Carta it was already, but remains important, especially over in America, because it helped underpin the most important, I imagine if you're from America, please tell me if this is true or not, document in terms of your country and how it's set up, and how everyone is, how the population and the your ruling class, government, however you want to put it, what that interaction looks like. So when I was at Runnymede, I did do a quick video on the monument there, paid for by the American Bar Association. So let's have a look. Here is the monument that you might recognise from Runnymede, and it was put here by the American Bar Association. It is made of English granite, or it's the pillar in the middle is, and I think that just goes to show just how important Magna Carta became actually outside of England. This medieval document English medieval document, the way it has travelled around the globe, and especially is important in America, taken over by the Pilgrim Fathers, and I think you would probably find that the Americans know a little bit more about Magna Carta generally than the English do. It wasn't until the 800 years commemoration in 2015 that really I heard Magna Carta talked about kind of in general. So Magna Carta has been referred to, alluded to, revived, whatever was required for all sorts of movements and causes throughout the centuries. Nelson Mandela quoted Magna Carta during his trial in 1967. The suffragettes talked about Magna Carta. Magna Carta was used on both sides of the slavery argument, and this really surprised me when I first started looking into Magna Carta, because of the clauses in there about freedom, and we think of it as liberty, this document of liberty and freedom. I did automatically assume that Magna Carta would have been used on the side of the argument for the abolition of slavery and obviously the slave trade. And in fact it was, but it was more strongly used on the opposition side. And this opposition to the abolition of slavery led to, or the clauses in Magna Carta about no man shall be disseised of his property without due compensation, I've shortened it there, was used on the side of, or the arguments of the slave owners. Now that was a successful argument. It led to £17 billion equivalent in today's money, being paid out in compensation to slave owners for their loss of, and I'm going to do the whole cliche thing here, property. Every man, woman, child, slave had a figure put on their head based on their sex, their age, their skill, and what plantations they were working on. And the slave owners were paid that compensation. It amounted to 40% of the government spend in the year that it was paid out, a massive amount of money. So I was quite shocked, actually, when I heard that Magna Carta had been used to argue that that people were being disseized of their property. So it's a very interesting topic. It's huge. It's a huge topic. And I think its importance has endured because it's almost a byword for freedom and liberty and democracy, which in fact it actually doesn't even refer to any democratic process in it, but it stands for that in our collective conscious, in our memories, in our beliefs, and that is why it is so important and why it is so enduring. So I would argue that it almost doesn't matter what the original document stated, because it is that essence, it is that legend, as Dan Jones calls it. He also referred to the myth of Magna Carta in his book, there's a link in the show notes. And it is that has meant that it's so important to people, and it is so enduring, because it almost, as I say, it almost doesn't actually matter what it said in the beginning, because we can hopefully all agree that these are aspirations that we wish for this world, and what Magna Carta looks to give us is an idea that it is attainable. And let's all hope that that is absolutely true. Thank you so much for joining me for this special episode of This Week in British History, dedicated to looking at, or introducing you actually, to the Magna Carta. Hopefully you've grasped just how big a topic, a subject Magna Carta is, because of the way it has endured and why it has endured over now 800 years, and what it means to us today, how it's been used. Hopefully it has pricked your interest and you are you would like to go and learn more. And if you do, then please look in the show notes. I have put many sources in there. If you come across some great sources as well, please put them in the comments, and that will help everyone expand their learning. But for now, if you are not subscribed, please subscribe, please hit the bell, perhaps give this video a thumbs up if you've got this far. I'm presuming you've quite liked it. If you write in the comments, I do endeavour to reply to all my comments. Sometimes I'm a little bit delayed, I'm sorry about that, but I will get round to everybody. And if you want more of a daily history hit from me, then please come and find me on Facebook or Instagram and Pinterest. I'm also trying to use a bit more now as well. But for now, take care and have a great week. I'll see you next time.